Two revolvers, both in .45 caliber, both carried by the U.S. cavalry back in the 1870s. One turned into a total legend. The other pretty much became a footnote in history. Today we're going to look at 10 big differences between the Colt Peacemaker and the Smith & Wesson Schofield. By the end, you'll see exactly why one gun earned its spot in the history books. Number 10. Let's start with where they came from. The Colt Single Action Army came out after some government tests in 1872 and 1873. William Mason and Charles Brinkerhoff Richards designed it for Colt's company. The Army needed something to replace their old percussion cap revolvers, guns that used metallic cartridges instead. The Colt won those tests fair and square and got picked up in 1873. The military called it the M1873 and right away ordered 8,000 cavalry versions. These had 7.5-inch barrels and shot the .45 Colt round. By 1874, thousands of them were already out there at frontier forts. Smith & Wesson took a different path. Their Model 3 came out in 1870 and was one of the first big American revolvers made for cartridges. It worked okay, but the .44 SW American cartridge wasn't powerful enough for what the Army wanted. Then a real cavalry officer named Major George W. Schofield got involved. Between 1871 and 1873, he got patents for improvements on the Model 3. His main change moved the barrel latch to the frame so a guy on horseback could open the gun with just one hand while still handling his horse. The Army tested his version in 1874, and a review board said it was good for military use. They ordered 3,000 of the first model Schofields in 1875, then another 5,000 of the second model. In total, the military got about 8,285 of them. Number 9. How you open them up and load them. The Colt has a solid frame with a little loading gate on the right side. You pull the hammer back to half cock so the cylinder soothes and spin free. Then you open that gate and drop in one cartridge at a time while turning the cylinder. Taking out the empty cases takes even longer. You use a spring-loaded ejector rod under the barrel and punch out each empty shell one by one. The whole thing can take over a minute if you're in a hurry, and black powder residue made it get dirty and slow down fast. The Schofield is totally different. It's a top-break design. You set the hammer at quarter cock, pull up the latch at the back of the frame, and the whole barrel and cylinder tip down. When the barrel drops, a star-shaped extractor pops up automatically and kicks out all 6 empty cases at once. Gravity helps a lot. You just drop in 6 new rounds, snap it shut, and you're good to go. A trained person could reload it in under 30 seconds under good conditions. That's at least twice as fast as the Colt. For guys on horses in the cavalry, that speed looked like a huge advantage. Number 8. How complicated the insides are. That fast reload came with a price. The Schofield had more moving parts, the hinge, the latch, and that automatic extractor. Everything had to fit together just right, almost like a fancy watch. If one thing was off, the whole gun could have problems. The Colt kept things simple with fewer moving parts and a solid frame that could handle rough treatment. It had looser tolerances, so it still worked even when it got dirty. On the frontier, hundreds of miles from any gunsmith, that kind of simple design mattered way more than something clever. Number 7. How heavy they felt and how they handled. The Colt cavalry model had a 7.5-inch barrel, measured about 13 inches long overall, and weighed around 2.31 pounds when loaded. It had a fixed blade front sight and a V-notch rear sight. The military versions came with one-piece walnut grips and either a blued or case-hardened finish. The grip angle made the barrel line up naturally with your arm. The Schofield second model had a slightly shorter 7-inch barrel and was about 12 to 13 inches long overall. It weighed more, around 2.8 to 3 pounds. It also had fixed sights and came with 2-piece walnut grips in a square butt style. The finish was blued with a case-hardened hammer and trigger guard. Shooters back then and now usually say the Colt just feels better in the hand. That plowshare-style grip points naturally, like you're pointing your finger at the target. It helps control the recoil and makes follow-up shots easier. The Schofield has a squarer grip with a bird's head shape. Some people like it, but a lot of folks find the Colt more comfortable for longer shooting. Overall, more people like the Colt's ergonomics. Number 6. The ammo situation. This is where logistics really decided things. The original .45 Colt cartridge used 30 to 40 grains of black powder behind a 250 to 255 grain bullet. It came out of the barrel at around 900 to 1,000 feet per second. That gave it serious power and serious recoil. A good hit could drop a man or even a horse at fighting distances. The .45 Schofield round, also called the .45 SW, was shorter, about 1.1 inches compared to 1.285 inches for the Colt. It usually had 28 grains of powder pushing a 230 grain bullet at 730 to 855 feet per second. That meant milder recoil and better accuracy for soldiers who didn't get much practice time. But here's the key part that changed everything. The shorter Schofield round could fit and fire in a Colt, but the longer Colt round wouldn't fit in a Schofield. In 1875, the Army decided to standardize on the shorter load so troops could share ammo in the field. Still, rim differences sometimes caused the rounds to bind up in Colts. Over the long run, logistics favored the Colt cartridge. The Schofield round did influence later designs. You can see its ballistics in the .45 ACP that came years later and lasted through 2 world wars. Number 5. How many the military actually bought. The Army issued around 37,000 Colt single-action Army revolvers during this time. They only issued about 8,000 Schofields. That's almost 5 to 1 in favor of the Colt. Both guns went to cavalry regiments like the 4th, 9th, and 10th. The 9th and 10th included the Buffalo Soldiers. These troops fought against the Sioux, Cheyenne, Nez Perce, and other tribes through the 1870s and 1880s. Some Schofields might have been at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, but most stories talk about Colts being there. The numbers say a lot. The Army bought nearly 5 times as many Colts. That shows what the commanders in the field were reporting back to Washington. Number 4. How they actually did in real fights. The Schofield's fast reload sounded great on paper. In a cavalry charge, being able to reload quickly could save your life. But real life on the frontier showed the weak spots. The Schofield's tight tolerances meant it got fouled up faster from black powder residue. The cylinder would start dragging sooner than on the Colt, which had looser clearances. On a moving horse, the top brake could jam if a cartridge got stuck during ejection or reloading. The same thing that made it fast also made it picky when things got messy. When things got messy, officers wrote in their reports that most cavalry fights only needed a few shots anyway. Full reloads in the middle of a fight were pretty rare. So the Schofield's speed advantage didn't come up as often as people thought. The Colt's ability to keep working in tough conditions turned out to be more important in real frontier battles where you'd fire your 6 rounds and the fight was usually done. Number 3. How tough they were when things went bad. Dust, mud, rain, rough handling, and almost no maintenance. That was normal out on the frontier. The Colt could take all of it. Its simple design and looser tolerances meant it kept working even when it was covered in grime. You could basically neglect it and it would still fire, while the same treatment would make a Schofield seize up. The Schofield was a precise tool built for accuracy and speed. That precision needed regular care. The hinge and latch were solid, but there were just more places where something could go wrong compared to a solid frame gun. In the hands of trained troops who had time to clean it, the Schofield worked great, but cavalry soldiers on long campaigns often didn't have the training or the time for that kind of maintenance. By the late 1870s, the Army started getting rid of the Schofields. They sold the extras to companies like Wells Fargo. A lot of them got their barrels cut down to 5 inches and went to state militias or regular civilians. The Colt stayed in service until 1892, when the Army switched to double-action .38 caliber revolvers. Refurbished Colt artillery models with 5.5-inch barrels even saw action later in the Spanish-American War and the Philippine insurrection. Number 2, who actually carried them and why that matters. On the civilian side, the Colt was everywhere. You could get it in different barrel lengths, 4.34-inch, 5.5-inch, and 7.5-inch, and in calibers, why not das? Bike, 44 to 40 that matched Winchester lever-action rifles. Cowboys, lawmen, and outlaws all packed them. Wyatt Earp carried a Colt. Doc Holliday carried a Colt. Billy the Kid carried a Colt. Years later, General George Patton carried ivory-handled Colts in World War II. The Schofield had some famous users, too. Jesse James supposedly used one, and his gun is in museums now. John Wesley Hardin carried one. Pat Garrett carried one. Virgil Earp liked them. Teddy Roosevelt owned one. Wells Fargo gave shortened Schofields to their guards. In movies, Clint Eastwood's character in Unforgiven used a Schofield in a way people still remember. But the Colt became the myth. The Peacemaker basically defined the Western movie genre for generations. They kept making Colts for over 457,000 total across different versions. Schofield production stopped back in the 1870s. Smith Wesson did some limited reissues in the 2000s for collectors, but that was it. Modern copies from companies like Uberti and Cimarron keep both guns going in cowboy action shooting matches today. In those timed events, people say the Schofield's fast reload still stands out. For everyday use, though, most shooters pick the Colt for its balance and reliability. Number 1. Which one was actually better? The Schofield was ahead of its time. Its top break design pointed the way toward the swing-out cylinders that later became standard on Smith Wesson revolvers. On paper, it had clear advantages for a cavalry trooper who needed to reload fast in ideal conditions. Ideal conditions. But ideal conditions didn't exist on the 1870s frontier. There were dusty trails that went on for hundreds of miles, black powder building up with every shot, and troopers who had little training and even less time to clean their guns carefully. In that world, the Colt single-action army was clearly the better choice. It was simpler, tougher, and more reliable when everything around you was falling apart. The numbers back it up. The Army handed out 37,000 Colts compared to only 8,000 Schofields. Commanders saw how both guns performed in real fights and kept asking for more Colts. The Peacemaker stayed in production and is still made today. The Schofield became a side note in history, an excellent design that was just a little too fancy for the rough times it was born into. The Colt helped push the westward expansion. It turned into a cultural icon that people all over the world still recognize. Both revolvers are amazing pieces of 19th century engineering and deserve respect. But one proved itself through mud, blood, and real hard use. One showed that simple reliability could mean the difference between living and dying out there. That gun was the Colt Peacemaker. The frontier needed tools that just worked no matter what, and the Colt delivered. That's why it won the West. .3's fast.